Let us look at Franklin's Arctic expedition. Captain John Franklin left England in May 1845 aboard two ships. They are HMS Erebus and HMS Terror. The HMS is basically Her Majesty's ship. So these are basically the British Navy's ships. On these ships, they went for the Arctic expedition. So the aim was to traverse the last unnavigated section of the Northwest Passage. So they want to actually conquer and establish that these are British colonies. So in the Canadian Arctic and to record magnetic data for future navigation. So these are the main reasons why they took that expedition. Around 129 people traveled with 1,000 books and 3 years supply of food. So they know that this is going to be a pretty long journey. So that's the reason they thought we have to have a lot of food and we also have to have other supplies that will last for years for our complete journey. And the food what they have taken was pretty huge amount. For example, 8,000 tins and 930 gallons of lemon juice were taken. The tins are basically the small tin cans where pemmican, cooked beef, cooked pork, preserved meat and soup were actually packed. So this is how they started their journey. Here is a rough sketch of the journey. From the Baffin Bay, they went up to the Devon Island and they were supposed to take this route which is given in the dotted line. But rather than taking a left turn, they actually took a right turn and they were just traveling through this one only. And when we look at some of the problems they have faced, the main reason was the turn what they wrongly took at this beachy island. So what are the specialities of this particular Franklin Arctic expedition? So this particular ships are actually transformed ships for this kind of expeditions. This ship was having central heating. They also have reinforced steel bows to cut through the thick ice. So this is the biggest problem because in Northwest Passage or in the Northern Sea Road, the sea is filled with lots of ice. So that means we need a very strong vessel to cut through the ice. So they wanted to have the reinforced steel bows so that they can easily cut through the thick ice, and also desalination plant because they may not be getting any water there. So they do need a desalination plant to get the drinking water. And also each boat was powered by a steam engine and screw propeller. So these are some of the important things which were required for the 3 years long journey. And these two ships were last sighted by two whalers. The people who went for whaling, they found out near the North Baffin Island. So this is the last time the Franklin expedition ships were actually seen by the outsiders. That is in 1845 July. They started in May and this is in July. And this HMS Erebus and HMS Terror became trapped in the ice floes in the September 1846 and they were deserted in April 1848. So that means they were unable to move. So there was no point in trying to navigate through the thick ice. So what happened finally was the ship was abandoned. Between 1847 and 1880, that is 26 expeditions were actually carried out by Royal British Navy and other people over land and by sea to in search of the lost ship, that is Erebus and Terror. So the wreck of HMS Erebus was located in 2014, very recently only they had found out, and also the wreck of HMS Terror was discovered in Terror Bay in 2016. So this clearly tells that like even though the people in the 18th and the 19th century wanted to figure it out like where the Franklin Arctic expedition ships were lost, they couldn't do it and they could be only found very recently. Although this expedition was considered one of the greatest expeditions by British, the tale of this expedition was not having a very happy ending. The rare daguerreotypes of the crew from Franklin Arctic expedition aboard HMS Terror and HMS Erebus offer a glimpse into the lives of these explorers. Captured in the mid-19th century, These portraits reflect their bravery and determination, providing valuable historical insights into one of the most famous Arctic missions of history. Most of the crew from this expedition did not return home. There were various causes of the death to the crew. The crew of Franklin Arctic expedition faced numerous health challenges that may have contributed to their tragic fate. Concerns about lead exposure from soldering cans, alongside the risk of botulism due to poor canning practices, raised doubt about food safety. Scurvy was a significant threat, despite efforts to use boiled lemon juice to prevent fermentation. Malnutrition, particularly zinc deficiency, further weakened their resilience. Tuberculosis, specifically pot disease, along with pneumonia, posed serious health risks. The harsh conditions led to hypothermia and starvation, compounding their struggles. While cannibalism has been speculated, evidence remains inconclusive, leaving many questions about the expedition's dire circumstances. The National Maritime Museum houses intriguing relics from Franklin's Arctic expeditions, including a knife, pocket chronometer, a fish hook, and telling a story of survival and navigation. An iron boat stanchion and fishing line reflect the crew's efforts to adapt to harsh conditions. Additionally, a wooden goggle highlights their attempts to protect against the extreme environment. Together, these artifacts provide valuable insights into the daily lives and challenges faced by the explorers during their fateful journey. Records from Franklin's Arctic expedition. The ledger books and cards, containing approximately 14,000 pages, document the use of chronometers essential for determining longitude during maritime navigation. These records provide invaluable insight into the history of seafaring. Additionally, expeditions searching for Franklin's lost ships and crew mapped thousands of miles of previously unsurveyed coastline, enhancing our understanding of Arctic geography. Together, these documents highlight the intersection of exploration, navigation, and the quest to uncover the mysteries of Arctic. Since the Franklin's expedition was not successful, let us look at some of the shortcomings of the Franklin's expeditions. The major problem was lack of leadership skills and decision making. This is one of the crucial factor which was missing in the Franklin's expedition, due to which the entire expedition failed. Franklin was shy, indecisive, stiff and traditional, so he cannot take the people along with him. That was one of the problems he was having, that leadership skill was lacking. And he was 59 years old and in very poor health when he took this expedition. He also had a nickname of man who ate his own shoes. So that means he was very a different kind of a person who doesn't gel very well with the rest of the people. So this is one of the reasons for the failure of this expedition. And of course, a very heavy bomb ship, that is Erebus and Terror, were a different type of ships. They were modified with various fittings to traverse through the sea for the Arctic expedition. But then, since they were bomb ships, there are several tons of less efficient steam engines were used to propel the ship. See, another biggest challenge was these Erebus and Terror ships were basically bomb ships. They were heavy. There were several tons of steam engine which was actually used to propel the ship. So in other words, the ship itself is very heavy, and on top of that we also have a very heavy steam engines on board. So that means it resulted in a very slow navigation. So this is also another big problem they have faced. And then the large scale of Franklin expedition, that means previously 134 men were there, but then later 5 men did not join. So the Franklin expedition itself was a very large one. So this large scale Franklin expedition required large amount of food, and various types of foodstuffs they were to be prepared in just 7 weeks, because the approval came for the expedition just a couple of months only earlier. So that's the reason the time to prepare the food was also very less. So which include, in fact, if we are going for a big expedition for a lot of people, then the food preparation requires lots of time. Back then we do not have any machine based approaches. So it was all cooking of the food, packing, closing of the lid and soldering, all has to be done by hand. So that means lots and lots of people were employed for that, but then that made this entire process less efficient. Not only that, and many things were done in a half finished way. And another biggest problem was they do not have a map. So if you are going to navigate but you don't have a proper map, then you know what are the problems you are going to face. That means you will be completely lost very quickly. So the scant maps to guide them and absolutely no ability to rely on compass bearing is another biggest problem they had. Then they didn't interact and couldn't rely on local people for meat, clothing and oil. So that means if you are traveling and you don't know the place, at least you need some support from the local people, but you do not know their language, then how you can communicate with them. So this is again another biggest problem the Franklin expedition explorers had. And of course, locating the sun was also a very challenge, because they were under the impression that because in Britain it was very sunny area, so people know that okay, we can just travel through this sea, it will not be a big problem. But when they went to the north, they figured it out like there is no sun, so they were unable to look at the sun for navigation. So that was also another biggest problem they have challenge they have faced. So these are all the various shortcomings the Franklin expedition faced. And of course, not only that, there were also various poor decisions taken. So for example, after mapping the Cornwallis Island, they chose to travel south rather than west. So this is another big problem. Broken ice sheets, iceberg, field ice, all travel south as well as along with them. So that means they had a very tough time navigating through this thick sheet of ice. And of course, there is no idea of the exact geography of King William Island, and they took a route south. They were actually, south means they took the wrong turn. So this is also another big problem they had. And the improper tools to cut the ice, axes, sledgehammers, chisel and ice saw were too small and ineffective, because the ice in the sea was like meters thick. So if it is meters thick, you need at least some very heavy tools to break them. But they have very small tools like chisels, ice saws and other things. They were highly inefficient and they couldn't complete the job. So they were unable to cut through the ice also. And tons of ice, basically they had tons of ice in front of them and they had only hand tools to remove them. Then you know that what is the difficulty they would have faced. Of course, pulling lifeboat and sledge packed with food, material and trekking south on foot made them weak and exhaust their energies. When the ship travel, that is navigation, was not possible, then they thought, okay, let us take our boat. But boat cannot sail, so they have to just drag it on the ice. So how will you go? You need food for the travel, so you have to put all the food on the boat also. So a boat filled with food is the one they were supposed to drag it, and that made them very weak and they lost lots of energies in these kind of activities. Of course, once they left the Greenland, there were hardly any communication, like they could not talk to the rest of the world that where they are going or how they are doing. So nothing. And other people also cannot inform them there were some wrong things they have taken. So these are all the poor decisions taken by the Franklin's expedition. This also led to the failure of that. And then later on, the Jeannette expedition, which started in 1879 to 1881. So here the US Arctic expedition was led by George De Long. His aim was to reach the North Pole by discovering a route from the Pacific Ocean through Bering Strait. So this is the route he actually wanted to travel through. And Jennette's fate disproved that open polar sea theory, because when he traveled there, people were under the impression that its North Ocean is actually an open sea. So that theory was disproved by Jeannette expedition. Here he proved that no, it is filled with ice, it is not an open sea. And of course, the appearance of debris from the wreck of southwest coast off Greenland indicated that the existence of ocean current moving the permanent Arctic ice from east to west. So this is one of the major thing they had found out, like how the ice was actually moving from east to west. So that is how they could see that existence of ocean current. So these were some of the observations made by the Jeannette expedition. And what the early explorer basically missed was basically they didn't have modern survival gear. Of course, this is one of the major problem they had. Apart from that, they also don't have the latest techniques. There was no GPS, there is no satellite navigation, so they don't know where they are. They were only relying upon campus, and the campus sometimes didn't function, and also the sun was not appearing all the time due to the cloudiness. So that means they had very, very primitive things for their navigation. So that is also a major problem they had. And there is no weather forecast, like storm is going to come, or it is going to be highly sunny, or it is going to be highly cloudy. So none of this information the people got. Of course, there is no way to make calls to the civilization. There is no phone back then. There is no satellite phones or any communication per se. Of course, there were no icebreakers. So this is also another problem. See, the Franklin expedition failed because they had very primitive tools or very small tools. So the icebreakers were not available. So this is also another problem. The earlier explorers had that expedition was failed because of these kind of things. And of course, many of them lack formal training. So living in a normal place and going to a Arctic are quite different things. So people, those who are not fully aware of what to expect, they were assuming that it will be like their own country, and they went with less preparation, and there was also no training. So these are some of the challenges, or some of the early explorers what they missed. And of course, another challenge in the sea when you are traveling through the sea is no trees are building to use as a landmark. So this is, everywhere you see only white and white because it's in Arctic, it's full of ice. So you don't know, you don't even see some mountains. If at least you see some mountains, you know that okay, this mountain is there. But when it is full of sea, full of ice, we don't even know what it is, where we are and other things. So this is one of the problem. And the wind direction, speed and weathers varied randomly. So that means it is very difficult to measure the distance, because back then people used to measure how much distance they traveled by the speed of the boat or their ship. When it was so slow, they were unable to know how much distance they have traveled, because it is neither constant. If you are traveling slow, at least if you are traveling slow for 2 hours, then it is fine. But for some time you travel slow, sometimes you travel fast because of the wind direction, the speed changes. So that means we are unable to see how much, we are unable to find out how much distance we have traveled. So these were the challenges when you are traveling in the sea back then. And of course, in the polar region, due to heavy ice, navigation in deep sea was extremely difficult.